you've had a fascinating career. What do we call you? Are you a lawyer, a politician? Are you an Indigenous leader? Like, how do we describe what your job is? Because there are people who are going to come along in future generations and say, well, what was your path? How did you do that? And then what did the work look like?
Gosh, I'm a lawyer, obviously by profession.
Where'd you study?
I went to the University of British Columbia Law School. I
Yeah.
graduated at the same time, in the same year as my sister in 1999. We're both lawyers. Had the opportunities since graduating to article downtown, and then I went and worked as a provincial crown prosecutor at the Main Street Criminal Courthouse here in Vancouver, knowing full well.
Down at Main and Cordova there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
They call it the zoo.
Yeah,
It's the
and
biggest
it is.
criminal courthouse in the country, and it is very busy.
That's an appropriate definition. I've been in there a number of times covering stories and so on, and it is a zoo. It's a real place to, earn your stripes, isn't it?
Certainly, it is.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed the time that I was a prosecutor. I can honestly say to this day I miss the work that I did at Main Street. I had the opportunity to go back there when I was Minister of Justice and visit the courthouse and go back to my old court room, which has now become a drug treatment specialized court, which I am fully supportive of. But my career is, I don't know what I would characterize myself as. I'm an advocate, a staunch advocate for social justice and inclusion and equality. I was raised by many political leaders and people involved in basic community development work back home in our communities. My father and my grandmother particularly, that taught me to use my skills and abilities, such as they are, to ultimately improve the quality of life for our people and people generally. So that led me from Main Street, being a prosecutor, to working at the BC Treaty Commission as a treaty commissioner, which I was for many years, to being elected by the chiefs of British Columbia as the regional chief. And
when you're a regional chief, what does that position look like? What kind of responsibilities and time commitment is taken up in that?
it depends on the individual. For myself, it was an all-encompassing position. I ran on a platform, which I still ascribe to this day to, entitled Building on Our Success. And it focused around good governance, settling the land question, health and education of Indigenous peoples. And I was elected by the chiefs, the 203 Indian Act chiefs in British Columbia, to represent them. I sat on the national executive of the Assembly of First Nations, where I held portfolios around governance and nation building.
That's pretty intense and specific work.
Pretty intense, specific. I, of course, had 203 bosses and the chiefs of the province and their citizens back home. But we functioned on the basis of working towards consensus and coming up as First Nations in British Columbia with a set of priorities and answering how we would get to and address those priorities or reach our goals. And we were able to, during the time that I was the regional chief, to establish a set of goals and to, for me and our leadership, advocate for those, both at the provincial level and at the federal level. And it was...
So can I ask you a couple of questions about that sort of job? Because
Sure.
I think that it sounds to me like there's long hours working in committee, you're in public events, you have to travel, that you need to have an ability to think your way through the objectives of the day,
Yes.
have extraordinary interpersonal skills, and have endurance. I can't think that you could do this job easily.
I mean, I've held a lot of positions, and positions are what you make of them.
Yeah.
And in this case, I had an extraordinary opportunity as the regional chief to bring people together, our chiefs. We worked really hard during that time to develop a governance toolkit to assist Indigenous communities to move beyond the Indian Act and nation build. And I've always been one that worked hard. I really have never gotten a lot of sleep, but I've always taught if you see something that needs to be done, you do it and you work hard to accomplish the end.
Well, your next role was as politician. There's the work of campaigning, and then there's the work of doing the job. What's that like? Because I watch it from the outside, but I don't know what it's like from the inside.
Well, it's very. I mean, I am or was an Indigenous politician, and I had to campaign to become the regional chief.
Yeah, so
but
you weren't new to
I wasn't new to
the
that
business of campaigning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But transitioning into running federally is a very different situation in that in the Indigenous political world, we don't have political parties. We have our own opinions and we advocate strongly for them, but there is no division in that sense. So it was a new reality moving into federal politics. I'd never been a member of a political party before. At the time I joined the Liberals, I still ascribe closely to their ideology around equality and inclusion and justice. I'm still the same person I was then, but campaigns are really hard work, and I don't care who you are running for. In order to get elected, you have to work your butt off every day from morning until night, and that's what we're doing now. That's what we did then, to reach as many people as you can, to make them feel like they know you, for one, and are comfortable with what you represent and are comfortable with you representing them in Ottawa.
Well, then you win, and then you become the Attorney General. I have no idea what the demands of that job must be like. What was you? Congratulations, you've won. Now get ready to work harder.
Absolutely.
And the pull, as we've seen, we've looked behind the curtain a little bit in your experience. The pull from so many different directions must be extraordinary. How do you prepare yourself for that?
Well, I mean, like from a very base, like a fundamental level, you have to have support around you. I am very fortunate to have a husband that's supportive, a family around me, and really good friends that support me and tell me if I'm doing something silly, or say that was really good. So a base of support. But you have to know, if you're a member of cabinet, particularly in a position like the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, you do not have much time for anything else but doing that job. And so for me,
the days are extraordinarily long.
well, I think
aren't they?
probably on average, I would get up around 5 in the morning, and I would get home maybe around between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. and I'd have night reading to do before I got up and did it all over the next day.
And that's when you were in Ottawa.
That's when I was in Ottawa.
And then still you had to come back and visit your constituency.
Yeah, well, I had a huge mandate letter from the Prime Minister, and an extraordinary staff and public servants that worked with me to accomplish basically everything that we were asked to do. So I enjoyed the work, even though it was tiring. It's pretty extraordinary to be in a position where you can make laws that transform the country. So I would not have changed that hard work for anything. But you're right. I'm also a member of Parliament, and I became the Minister of Justice because I was able to be elected as a member of Parliament. I'm fully committed to the constituents in Vancouver-Granville. So I would probably get back every second week, maybe every third week, and I would leave on a flight on Friday, and I would get back, and I would have back-to-back meetings Saturday morning till Saturday night, and then I would get on a plane on Sunday morning to head back to Ottawa. But it was really important to do that, and all members of Parliament work incredibly hard. But for me, particularly being in that position, I don't know if other ministers feel the same way. It was so important to come back to the constituency, to have meetings like back to back with people that had issues, whatever their issue was, to have that grounding, to understand what the views, continue to understand what the views are in Vancouver Granville. And I knocked on doors almost every weekend that I was back.
Wow.
So.
So the last thing that is in my mind when I think about the role that you had as Attorney General and Minister of Justice is the weight of responsibility and the incredible amount of scrutiny that is ever present in every single decision you make. Yes, you talk about all that stuff, but at the end of the process on each one of the decisions that you make, you're still making that decision.
Yes. It's
like I've never had that, and I can't imagine what prepares you to do it, and then how you endure that.
It is, when you think about it that way, or when I listen to you describe it, it's an extraordinary amount of responsibility that's placed upon all ministers or MPs. In my case, there were almost all decisions, the buck stopped with me. I was the one, I could take advice from my deputy minister and my public official, or my public servants and minister's office staff, but at the end of the day, it would be me signing on that line or making a determination of yes or no. It's an extraordinary weight to have on one's shoulders, but how I was able to move through that and embrace the role was, one, having a clear understanding of the two hats that I was wearing as Minister of Justice and as the Attorney General, understanding the law and my responsibilities for 40 plus statutes, and really ensuring that I did my due diligence all the time and had the best of advice from within the department and across government to make decisions. And again, being comfortable with the knowledge that you've done everything, and at the end of the day, you're comfortable with the decision that you've made, and that you're able to look yourself in the mirror after you've made those decisions. That's how I was able to get through.
So with these conversations about careers, I envision young people now and in the future looking at you and others, but in particular you saying, well, okay, I want to follow in your footsteps. What's the most important thing that I need to do to get me moving in the direction of making a difference, contributing the way that you did to our collective society? What would be that, make sure you do this kind of statement that you can offer?
Well, if there is one person, young person that looks at me and wants to, become involved in politics or wants to achieve what they see I have achieved, I encourage them to do so, and that feels really good. I would say to them what my grandmother said to me when I was really young: if you believe in yourself, if you know where you come from, and you're purposeful in your actions, and you work hard to achieve the goals that you set for yourself, nobody can take that away from you, and you can accomplish anything that you want to accomplish. And I suspect that, I've said somewhere recently that I am the first Indigenous person to be the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General. I suspect I'm not going to be the last, and I'm hopeful that there's a lot of Indigenous people that put their names forward for federal election, for election in their home communities, but just put their names forward to stand up and be leaders in whatever area that they want to be involved in.